good afternoon or good evening to everyone joining us today. My name is Eric Johnson, and I'm the Senior Technology Editor at the Journal of Commerce, which is part of S&P Global. And I'm delighted to be leading a webcast today, Navigating the Future, Digital Solutions in Payment and Documentation. We're going to focus today on the future of digital payment solutions and documentation in the global shipping industry, something near and dear to my heart. I cover that every day, every week at the Journal of Commerce, and really delighted to be joined by a group of experts today who I'm going to introduce in just a second. Our experts today are going to explore how technologies are revolutionizing trade processes by ideally reducing paperwork, eliminating errors, enhancing transparency, and making shipping more efficient and secure. So joining me today are Liji Nowal, who is CEO of a company called ODeX, Nemmara Subu, who is with Hapag-Lloyd, and Bob Brody with PayPal. Before we jump in to having them introduce themselves, just a couple of things about the platform we're using. You can submit a question to myself or any of the panelists at any point during the next hour during our session. Just do that by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I'll be monitoring those, and we'll get to as many of those as we possibly can. If there's any that we don't get to, look for us to follow up offline after the event. And there's also any other tech issues, just let us know if you're having trouble with anything on the platform. But otherwise, very simple and intuitive. You can just sit back and listen and take notes. So I'm really excited. Payments are something that I've covered for a very long time in my career, probably 15 years or so. And the shipping industry especially has suffered from sort of a chronic lack of adoption and application of technology. But things have changed, whether it was the pandemic or some other forcing function. Things have definitely changed, and we're going to explore some of those innovations and changes in not just the technology itself, but the adoption of users in the space as well. So before we jump into the discussion, though, I want to have each of our panelists introduce themselves and their companies. Liji, do you want to start off?
Thank you, Eric, and a warm welcome to everyone who's joined us now. My name is Liji Nowal, and I am the CEO of ODeX. We are a platform that specializes in connecting ocean carriers with all the stakeholders that they deal with on a daily basis, especially agents, freight forwarders, and importers. And our focus area has been digitizing documents. And when we started digitizing documents for cargo release, we stumbled into the problems of payments that Eric just mentioned, and where we then started partnering with a lot of payment solution companies and banks globally to bring more efficiency to this space so that cargo releases can happen faster. We are right now live in 15 countries across the world. We are in the United States also, and we hope to grow much faster than this. And over to you, Eric. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Liji. Nemmara, you want to give a little background on yourself? Your company probably doesn't need too much of an introduction, but you can give a little bit one.
Yes, of course. We are a 176-year-old company providing ocean transportation services for our customers. Yes, we probably don't need much introduction as a company. But about myself, I'm Nemmara Subu. I'm now Senior Vice President for Customer Service here in the United States of America. And I've been with Hapag-Lloyd for the last 20 years and had the good fortune of working in many countries, many cities around the world, including New Jersey, Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, Mumbai, and now I'm here in Atlanta.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us, Nemmara. And Bob, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Again, another company that probably doesn't need much of an introduction, but you can.
Hey, everyone. Bob. Thanks, Eric. Bob Brody with PayPal. I've been with PayPal for a couple of years. However, I've been in payments for just over 20 years. Spent some time at WorldPay, First Data, and then some large banks in payment divisions, Bank of America and Capital One Bank. Early on in my career was a lot of B2C. And over the last 10 years, I continue to see more and more B2B companies, like in this industry, taking on credit card as a form of payment method. When you think of PayPal, right, a lot of you probably think of B2C, but we're much more than that. PayPal does have a platform called Braintree, which is our credit card processing platform. which really does specialize in B2B transactions. So excited to talk about that today, but then also the power of PayPal and what it can do for B2B companies like all of you on this call. So appreciate the time and looking forward to the conversation. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. That's definitely a topic I wanted to bring up later. So glad you sort of foreshadowed that a little bit. So maybe, Liji, let's start off the conversation with you. You mentioned ODeX is in 15 different countries, including the US. What would you say about the US market when it comes to payment for ocean freight services or logistics services? What do you think is unique about this market relative to the other markets you serve? Or conversely, is it not unique and it suffers from the same challenges that other markets do?
So when we came here, I think one of the things that we brought with us was a lot of respect for the US in terms of the technology that has come out of the US across the decades. And the United States has been a pioneer in everything to do with payments, or in fact, PayPal, the original payment solution that we all think of, came out of the US. Now, for us, when we work with ocean carriers and their ecosystem, the biggest challenge has been that it is B2B payments. In a large country like the US, which is definitely the largest market for any importers, what we're looking at is the challenges that come in are very, very different from the other markets. And why I say this is because, and we just spoke about this, cash is completely out in the US market. When we look at a lot of developing nations, you could still walk up to an ocean carrier, pay them cash, and get your release done on the same day, within the same hour. But that doesn't happen in the US. So what really happens is ACH, bank transfers, wires. And when it is these kind of solutions, you're also looking at the timeline in which the payment gets processed or reconciled at the carrier's end to go up. This is one of the biggest challenges that we saw in the US. It is a challenge in the rest of the world. So in that sense, the US is not unique. But looking at the kind of solutions that have been built in the US, we see that B2B payments are still lagging behind. Globally, they are lagging behind. The focus always has been on B2C, easier to roll out, more glamorous, less checks when it comes to paying from your own personal account. But the US certainly is lagging behind a few markets when it comes to B2B payments. And then we found a partner like PayPal, which is now working very closely with us to build the solution that's right for ocean carriers and their customers. So I hope we see a little bit of change come in with this kind of solution, but definitely lagging behind in B2B.
So let's maybe step back a little bit, Liji. What does the typical payment process that you've observed in the US look like, irrespective of what you're doing with other panelists on today? If I'm a shipper or a forwarder, how am I going about paying my ocean carrier for services, for fees, for cargo release, what have you?
So if you're a forwarder and you have been assigned to clear some shipment on behalf of your cargo owner or importer, what you're typically going to do is to download the invoice and wire or ACH the payment to the ocean carrier. There are a few platforms like PayCargo or Cargo Sprint that allow certain B2B payments, but what I see is that the adoption rates of those platforms are less than 20% right now in the market. When we look at ACH or wire-based transfers, here's where the challenge starts coming in, because once you've wired or send an ACH to the carrier, you're going to send out an email saying that here is a reference number, can you please trace my payment, and can you then please issue release documents? Now, at the carrier's end, there are multiple challenges. There is no control over the amount, first of all. So if there's a short payment or an excess payment, the carrier is going to find it difficult to reconcile the payment. Second, you got to remember at the carrier's end, this a lot of times might be a semi-manual intervention that's required, because not often are there solutions where the reconciliation of the banking information that comes in happens in real time with the invoicing information. So which means that this somebody on the other side working with someone like a Nemmara's team who's going to be looking at the payments, looking at an invoice, checking whether you have actually paid the invoice in full, and also whether you've cleared all the payment dues for a particular BL. All of this takes time. So today, when you're looking at ACH timelines that have been brought down to maybe 3 or 4 hours, the release is still not going to happen in 3 or 4 hours. And it's not because the carrier is not trying. It's because the tools are not helping the carrier reconcile on a real-time basis. Things are changing now. We have FedNow and RTP that's coming up in the United States. But again, the challenge with that is that unlike a lot of other geographies where we operate, this is not a single platform for all the banks in the US. So which means that it all depends on which network is a bank participating in. Is it RTP? Is it FedNow? And how many customers are really aware of using FedNow and RTP for payments? So simple things, 80% of the 70 or 80% of the market that pays using an ACH or a wire is going to see that their release documents will come in earliest in 4 hours, latest could be depending on how many documents you have submitted and how clearly have you submitted things. But latest could be 24 hours or 48 hours. So this is where the gap is.
Yeah. Nemmara, let's bring you in to give kind of the shipping line perspective on this. Do those timelines sort of match up with your experience? And, you know, how is it? And I guess another way to ask this is the main problem with the current process speed or lack of speed?
So definitely, Eric, I echo what Liji just mentioned, that something that would historically take us 48 hours, right? The payments that come through ACH, wire, and other means would traditionally take us 48 hours to confirm the payment once the money from the bank has come into our account, and then we reconcile that. And that today takes us less than an hour, right? So this is a huge benefit for our customers because then it enables us to go to the next shipping process, which is, as soon as the customers pay, they either are looking for their BL or cargo release if it's an import cargo. So that is definitely a long way we have come with the partnership of our partners like ODeX. And I'm also happy to announce today the customers have the ability to make payments for Hapag-Lloyd invoices through PayPal, effective today. In fact, this is the launch date for our PayPal option for our customers through our ODeX platform. So this is a huge benefit for our customer. Where is 48 hours versus where is less than an hour? And this is definitely a game changer in terms of the subsequent shipping process, which is release of the cargo or the release of the OBL, right? If it's an export shipment. So that's definitely been a huge enhancement to the customer experience through our partners like ODeX and PayPal.
So just to emphasize what you just said, for people who aren't clear about how payment is related to cargo or documentation release, until the shipping line can confirm the payment, right, the document or the cargo is not released to the party that on what would be the notified party or whoever the party is arranging to pick that up, right? So I think that's the idea that cargo is available in terms of physically available and clearing customs. Sometimes people think those are the only hurdles that need to be crossed, but obviously the payment piece is also, is that universal across the board? Are there any exceptions? Are there arrangements you have with certain forwarders or shippers where you have a relationship or offer credit in a way that doesn't impact things?
Yeah, obviously, we have a significant portion of our customers who enjoy extended credit facility. For them, definitely this is, we don't hold back the document release for our credit customers. But even for the credit customers, what our partners have to offer, the various payment options that we today have through ODeX, such as PayCargo, Venmo, PayPal now, as of today. So these options didn't exist before. And, and one key feature of the benefit of ODeX today, because of the compliance, we are required to only present the invoice to the parties on the BF, right? We cannot share the invoice with multiple parties, whereas we know our customers, our consignees, and our shippers expect their agents, their brokers, their forwarders, or even truckers to make certain payments. And this is again another innovation that we have through our ODeX platform, which is the advanced delegation option, where even though we have to comply with the legal requirements of presenting the invoice to the correct parties, but the customers have option to delegate that payment to their agents, brokers, their truckers even. And we are fortunate to be able to provide that service in spite of the rigid requirements, FMC requirements for invoice payment.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of background on what Nemmara is talking about. Earlier this year, the Federal Maritime Commission, US, issued a ruling that said that shipping lines and container terminals have to invoice the cargo owner and cannot directly invoice the cargo owner's representative or service provider, ostensibly to avoid confusion or duplicate billing for the same service. But as you point out, the ruling does not specify that the cargo owner has to make the payment themselves. They just have to be the one that receives the invoice, and they themselves can delegate to a service provider to pay that bill. What you're saying is the platform itself allows you to delegate to which party you would like to make the billing, the payment. Is that correct?
Correct. That's correct. And when this ruling came out, we definitely knew many of our customers wanted this feature or this flexibility of having different parties make the payment. And we were fortunate to partner with ODeX and have be able to provide that flexibility, very quickly to our customers while complying with the legal requirements of the invoice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting ruling and very interesting to see technology sort of applied to the compliance with it. Bob, let me bring you in. PayPal. You sort of referenced this in your opening remarks, right? I think most of us have had some experience, if not a lot, with using PayPal to pay merchants or in some sort of B2C scenario. Before we get into sort of like what you do in the B2B space, what specifically interested PayPal about the shipping and logistics space? Where did you see inefficiencies that were there to be tackled?
Yeah, I think, so Nemmara and Liji touched upon some of them. I think first and foremost, right, shipping is obviously an international business, and so is PayPal. So our reach is just like the shipping industry and multi-currencies and many different countries that we work with. So there was that opportunity for us to partner with shipping partners because of the same geographies, right? The globe that we all work in. The biggest gaps that we can see that PayPal's products, and again, not just PayPal, but Braintree, can help the shipping industry in the B2B space were, the limited options there were, the speed of the transaction, so the opportunity to improve the speed, having flexibility for both pay-ins and payouts, convenience, and I think a big part of it too is security and reliability, right? So when we process a transaction immediately and provide that authorization, the funds on the credit card or the PayPal account are valid, it's a brand that you can trust. We have over 450 million users throughout the world and over 50 million merchants. So we have a very large database to test the validity of transactions when we receive them coming in, not just in the US, but again, across the entire globe. And, looking at the shipping industry, everything seemed to be very manual. And we were able to come in and, like, the topic of this conversation, digitize and speed up transactions so everyone can run their business more efficiently and with confidence.
So let's dig in a little bit to that difference between B2C and B2B, right? Since I think think it's probably fair to say, unless people have had experience dealing with PayPal on a B2B basis, most of our interactions have been B2C. What can you kind of summarize some of the differences that, when PayPal and some things that are common between B2B and B2C, when PayPal is looking at a market to empower in a market on a B2C side versus B2B? I mean, the one that jumps to my head is just scale of transactions or size of invoices. Are there things beyond that are more complicated in the B2B world?
So I do think in the B2B world, there's an opportunity to lower costs. So if you rewind 10 years ago, I think the pushback we would get from B2B businesses, specifically those in the shipping industry, is it costs too much. The cost of acquisition of a credit card is too much, where, we'd rather wait a couple more days and get that transaction with less of a fee. There's been changes over the years with the card networks, MasterCard and Visa specifically, with the amount of data they collect. So a lot of what we do is educate our B2B businesses on level 2, level 3, and large ticket transactions. So if we can capture more data at the time of transaction, it will then lower the risk to the card networks, which in turn lower the costs that are passed through the business.
Interesting.
Because our network is so large, we can speed up that checkout experience, even though we have multiple requirements by MasterCard and Visa to lower those costs. But when doing so, you can almost cut a transaction fee in half from the card networks, because that's where a majority of the costs come from, or from the networks themselves, especially when you're dealing with international transactions. So that's been a big part, Eric, of the transformation of PayPal and Braintree working more with B2B industries, is that education of level 2 and level 3 processing, and understanding that it can be just as quick as a B2C transaction and as secure. And there's many different ways that you can accept that payment, whether it's online, over the phone, someone's keying in the transaction through your website, pay by invoice. There's multiple different ways. And then, with PayPal in particular, you wouldn't think that there's not too many companies making payments B2B through their PayPal account, but a lot of single owner companies that you have in this industry will use PayPal or Venmo to make payments. And then when they use that wallet, they use their PayPal wallet, they can break those payments up into 4, 6 months, 12 months installments through our buy now, pay later feature that we have as well. So it gives your customers a lot of options, convenient options to make payments. You never want someone to leave a checkout because their preferred option of payment is not available. And that's what we want to do. Again, whether it's PayPal, Venmo, our platform allows Apple Pay and Google Pay too.
So this is interesting. Do you think there's just a greater appreciation for that cost, whatever the fee is, whether it's been reduced over time, that fee is an okay price to pay for the options it gives you in terms of getting paid more quickly, reducing manpower associated with reconciling things over a 2-day period, the buy now, pay later kind of options? There's like a better understanding of how these strategies way whatever the fee is. Is that fair to say?
We're competing against margins, right, on all sides of the house.
Yeah.
But I think also a lot of the folks that we talk to in this industry, if we can save human power and time with the speed and convenience of these transactions, even if the costs are slightly more than, let's say, a check, it's well worth it. And then there are tools to protect fraud as well. So there are probably instances of fraud that comes up that takes a lot of time off, from these shipping companies' plate. But we can take that off of their schedule and control the fraud, help them control the fraud, offer dispute automation and chargeback resolution. So there's a lot of tools to free up the time where you can focus on other parts of the business than accepting and managing payments.
Yeah. Nemmara, I was joking before we got on that in a past company, I did a benchmark study on payment that looked at shipping in particular, and the name of the report was "The Check is in the Mail," because back then, this is more than a decade ago, it was still the majority of payments were being made by check. Does Hapag-Lloyd still accept checks? Secondly, when did you notice a change in terms of electronic payments as a bridge to what we're talking about today?
Sure. Very interesting question, Rick. Yes. The funny story was that until last year, before we moved into our new headquarters in Atlanta, customers were still few customers. There were few stragglers who were still insisting on paying through check. And we had to literally tell them, there is no more mailing address for you to mail your checks in. So that's how we got rid of the last few stragglers. But yes, this journey for us started almost 8 years back when we started, providing. Of course, we had wire and ACH before that. But 8 years back, we started our journey with Pay Cargo, which was one of the first payment solutions that Hapag-Lloyd introduced in the US market. And then we are also very proud to now have introduced ODeX to the market here in the US. And, and all the related solutions that come with ODeX. That is also by having multiple options for our customers. Now, I would, what Bob was saying, in terms of bringing down the cost, yes, there is value in paying that additional cost with the value of the multiple payment options that you get with PayPal or the security of your transaction. But I would say that opening up, our ODeX platform for multiple payment options also creates, a good healthy competition for our various payment options that we offer, and that will ultimately also bring down the cost for our customers. So we are very, we've been ahead of the curve in this regard, I feel, to a larger extent, and we continue to, explore other options, and our partners like PayPal and ODeX bring a whole new dimension to this whole, value creation for our customers with, their experience in this payment field more than what we being a traditional shipping company have. So we are tapping into that resource through our partners, and that is the direction we are heading.
So, Nemmara, I had a question, and maybe Liji, I'd get your thoughts on this as well, since your customers are the shipping lines. To what extent? So, I mean, one thing I've covered over a good part of my career is the extent to which invoices are inaccurate and need to be resolved in some way, whether the inaccuracy, whatever caused the inaccuracy to happen. The bill is inaccurate, it needs to be resolved, and that requires time and resources on both ends, if not multiple parties beyond that, right? So I guess my question is, have the historic challenges around that been because the payment process is not digitized, or is there some other underlying dynamic in this market that creates those discrepancies, would you say? Nemmara, I'll ask, or Liji, yeah, please, you start.
No, I'm happy to go first, Liji, if you don't mind.
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah, still, in spite of having partners like ODeX and PayPal helping us, we still struggle with this aspect, Eric. This is definitely, as Liji also mentioned in her earlier comments, the short payment or payment against an arrival notice or payment against a BL. Those are the challenges we still face, and that leads to a dispute downstream. Whereas with the ODeX platform, we try to streamline that process, where we insist that customers pay against the invoice. And when the customers do that, they also get the benefit of fast payment confirmation, because the reconciliation process is more streamlined in the back end for us, and that helps the customers ultimately. And this goes to my point of waiting for 48 hours versus getting a confirmation within an hour, it's a huge win. Maybe, Liji, you want to add something to this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you asked this question, Eric, because it is something, there, there are two or three aspects of this entire challenge of invoicing, or I mean, it all gets clubbed under invoicing, but the first and foremost is discipline at both sides, which is both the customer end and at the carrier end. At the customer end, when we speak of discipline, we have to remember it is a service provider who is clearing the cargo or handling a BL on behalf of a cargo owner. So the service provider does not have complete information from the cargo owner, then there are lapses that are bound to come in. So we see this quite often as to disputes on free time or disputes on where do we pick up or whose name is the invoice, and the FMC stepped in and kind of resolved that for everyone. Who gets the invoice and whose name? So, but imagine it was such a problem that the Federal Maritime Commission had to step in to solve this problem. So that's, and as an outsider's view, somebody who has nothing to do with the ocean carrier or the shipping industry, I feel it's a matter of discipline on both sides, not having the right information sent to the right stakeholder at the right time. The second one is a string of emails that goes back and forth, or a string of phone calls that goes back and forth. That is something where we've been able to step in and digitize the entire process. So today, if you have to raise something, it is completely transparent. You have methods of instructing a carrier to carry out certain tasks on your behalf. And the carrier also has a very transparent way of sharing the invoice and the amount due to the customer. This was missing. And this is the piece of digitization that we did the heavy lifting on. And I'm glad that today, at least, all the customers who use ODeX can get all this information on a single dashboard. This was missing, and this is where digitization steps in. The third one, and most importantly, is the kind of ability in the market to provide payment solutions. So when we work in the United States, we work with partners like PayPal, PayCargo, CargoSprint, and also the banks there. But what we have to remember is payments especially can be a very localized flavor to how customers are used to paying. So for example, when we are in Africa, we actually work with banks and mobile money operators. It's a very traditional method, which is the banking method, and mobile money, which is probably something that not many of us in the developed economies use, because Africa actually jumped from the mainframe to mobile, and they did not have the laptop in between. So we work extensively with mobile money operators. 30% of all payments coming through mobile money in Africa. So for us, it's also that the ability to identify the local flavor and work for customer experience and local flavor that will eliminate all these disputes under invoicing, because it's not really invoicing. It's a whole lot of factors. I get an invoice. Did I get the invoice in time? Or could I see the invoice in time? Did I make a complete payment? Did I get complete information from the cargo owner telling me that, okay, this is the number of free days, this is the delivery timelines. So a whole lot of factors go into it. And I think a lot of the studies actually do a lot of injustice to both the carriers as well as their customers, because it's all clubbed under this one big topic called as invoice disputes, which is not what it is.
Very interesting answer. Yeah, I think relevant to the topic we discussed earlier about speed is the dispute and reconciliation of disputes, or resolution of disputes, I should say, has been this thorn in the side of the industry, right? And I think both parties in certain instances have used delays, whether it's responding to an email or responding to a phone call, in their favor if they've short paid, or if they feel the carrier has overpaid and all of a sudden the carrier doesn't respond back to a request to sort of go over that invoice again. So to have a platform where the payment goes through quicker, or that resolution process goes through quicker, and then to have a platform where you can both see that same sort of pane of glass, it's definitely different than I think what's going on over the past 2 decades for sure. So yeah, very interesting. So Liji, let me pose a more philosophical question for you. Are the challenges right now more cultural or technical in terms of changing adoption? You had mentioned low adoption rate of existing tools that have been on the market for a while, and they have engineering departments and product departments that are making it better day by day, right? So is it a technical problem that the systems just don't, up until you guys obviously came along, solve this process? I say that tongue in cheek, obviously, but or is it that sort of classic thing that we see in the shipping industry where it's very difficult to change culture?
So the big challenge of answering a question like this is, which part of the ecosystem am I going to antagonize? So,
yeah. So the key, in my experience, the key is to antagonize them all equally, so no one
yes,
feels.
that's what I'm going to do. So I'm a technologist at heart. So if someone tells me that the issue is technical, I find it a little hard to believe. And for me, the biggest challenge usually is that if it's, well, it is because you have not got down to the brass tacks and understood what the customer really wants. So sometimes we all try and hide behind this this facade and say that, oh, there was a technical issue, it could not have been solved until XYZ technology came in. Today we have the tools to actually solve a lot of the problems that ocean carriers and their customers face. I think it's about getting down, dirtying your hands and digging your heels in and saying that we will wait until customers are able to see the value. And we will also work very closely with customers on both sides, whether it is carriers or whether it is forwarders and agents, to ensure that the solution meets the needs of both parties. So a lot of blame has to fall on the technologist. It is pointing at us rather than at any of our customers. Is the problem cultural? I don't have an honest answer because I haven't examined that in detail. But there's one cultural difference that I see in the United States that is different from elsewhere in the world, is that customers are fairly demanding when it comes to the speed at which they want their cargo released, but they can be fairly laid back in the adoption of new tools. So like Nemmara mentioned, Hapag has had a provision of digital payment tools for the last 8 years. But I also feel that that's also changing, because once COVID hit and once customers did not have an option of going out and risking their lives, they said, wait a minute, this seems much more easier. So, and that's where adoption of tools like ODeX went up. I think what we are now seeing is the shift in the mindset to say that, yes, just because I have a check, I don't have to use it. I probably can go onto my mobile, and if I'm able to tap for my coffee, why can't I pay for my cargo just by clicking a button? That's the change that we're seeing. What we're also seeing is a lot more younger people coming in. I have nothing against people of my generation, but honestly, you see a lot more younger people coming in, people of my son's age who are coming in into this industry, and they are asking questions. They're saying that, why should we be working after 5 or 5:30 in the evening trying to resolve a payment problem? I mean, this should have been done ages back. That's the challenge that we see now happening, and that's a good challenge for every stakeholder involved, whether it's ocean carriers, whether it's forwarders, whether it is us technologists. We are forced to hear them, because there was a time when it was expected in the ocean shipping industry that you are available 24/7. Not anymore. You would really want to pack up and go home and say that, my container is on the truck and is going to reach on time. And when you understand that mindset, you start building for that. That's how you take care of culture, I feel.
Yeah. Nemmara, and your thoughts?
Yeah. Just want to add, I think Liji pretty much summarized the challenge. We went through some of this challenge together here in the US when we launched some of the products. One more thing, in addition to the cultural aspect, I feel that many of our customers, the security aspect is weighing in their mind, right? Whenever we ask them to use a new platform or new technology or something like that, and there is all this, news cycle about your data being compromised, and that leads to other challenges for our customers. So definitely there is a concern with that security aspect, which is also delays the adoption of some of these technology. And when we have a clear value generation, with some of these products, that is the key, right? As I said earlier, right? When you go from 48 hours to confirm a payment to less than an hour, and then the customers see a clear value generation. And also I want to mention the delegation option, right? These are clear value generation for which are addressing the challenges that we face in shipping industry. So those help, but in addition to that, the security aspect is becoming another key factor in adoption of new technology. That's what I would like to add.
Those are both interesting issues, right? Like I think we think of the friction that new systems can create from changing workflows and behaviors, right? But what you mentioned in terms of like, oh, a new system, is this safe? Do I need 2 or more factor authentication to get into it? Is that going to impede me? They're sort of connected in a way, right? Like a change to the mindset of workflow is sometimes related to security concerns, and sometimes it's related to, oh, now I have to do a few more things to ensure that it's a secure transaction, but it's faster over time, right? Very interesting. And I think the other element you just brought up, just to emphasize, customers seeing that the value is not accruing only to the company that's doing the invoicing, but actually the one that is paying the invoice, is obviously very key to driving adoption across the industry instead of it just being forced on one party. So that's a extremely important element to highlight. I appreciate it. Bob, I'm curious. You spent 20 years in payments, not all in the shipping logistics industry. Are there, now that you're focusing on this, are there lessons to be learned from other industries that the shipping industry could learn from, do you think? Are you seeing some sort of common things that were challenges in other industries that have been solved?
I think the flexibility of payment. I mentioned buy now, pay later, right? And that's connected to PayPal transactions, but even with credit card transactions, you can set up recurring payments. So healthcare was a vertical that wasn't popular with credit card payments. Usually, you get your bill in the mail and then you send a check, at least here in the US, and then you pay your medical bill for the appointment you had a month earlier. Now you can pay with credit card, but if it's a large bill, right, say $6,000 or $12,000, you can break that payment up over 6, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. That's something I feel this industry could definitely tap into, because you have some large transactions that are involved, on both sides here. So I think recurring payments, I think the security aspect is a piece of it as well too. When you have a payment provider that is a brand that folks can trust and rely, your customers are going to continue to come back to you for business. You're going to create more loyalty, and that goes a long way. I mean, there's a lot of different payment processors out there, but if we put 2 websites side by side, and one has the PayPal logo and the other doesn't, they're more likely to buy from the website with the PayPal logo. And they may not, that doesn't mean they're going to use PayPal. They could use their debit card or their credit card. So working with brands that are international is important too in this industry. There are a lot of payment processors out there that may only operate in 1 or 2 countries. You want an international partner. And there are, it's not just PayPal and Braintree. There's many, there's a good half dozen out there. But that's a path you don't want to go down to. You don't want to go down to a partner that's not agnostic to the different platforms and the different currencies and countries.
Yep. Yeah, no question. I mean, just observing, not a specialist at all in the world of payments, just observing the technology world, the number of different payment processors and rails that are out there is really exploded over the last decade. But certainly when people feel are ready to make a payment, you want to gravitate toward those logos that you've seen over a period of time, I think, first and foremost. So and maybe some of those processors will become kind of household brands over the next decade as well, and increase the range of options. I think maybe the big picture is like the pie is very big, right? And very little of it has been eaten at this point on the digital payment side of things. So Liji, I wanted to ask one question. So maybe one question for each of you to wrap up, and then we have a few really good questions that have come in on the Q&A too. So we'll finish up with those. For me, observing the space, a lot of times people have not invested in technology or improving process, or sometimes in even challenging an invoice that they think is incorrect. I've often felt it's because they feel like the juice is often not worth the squeeze, right? If it's a single fee that you think was incorrectly charged, or if it's a carrier and they didn't get a payment for a fee that they believe was due, but it's a small percentage of the overall bill, the feeling has long been that the resources required to track down that payment that's due or that's due or not due, it is way more expensive than the actual fee that you're trying to dispute, right? So is from the cargo release perspective or the document release perspective, are we at a point now where that juice is worth the squeeze because the technology makes that more efficient? Is that a decent way to think about it?
Absolutely, Eric. I think the technology does make it more efficient to track down each single penny that you're spending and ensure that you're paying in full, that the carrier is getting paid in full, and there are no reasons for disputes. There's also a more interesting play to it. Let's face it, I mean, it's every time you're going to waive off something on the carrier side, or every time you're going to say that, a dollar is not worth arguing over, there's a trust broken between the customers. And when we look at shipping as an industry, I think trust plays a very important role, because carriers are giving you their container for long periods of time to take home, empty it out and get it back. The carrier is hoping that you will pay them for providing the service. The customer is waiting for anywhere between 7 days to 45 days to receive their cargo. So this industry is actually built on trust. And then the ability to maintain that trust by ensuring that payments are made in full, there is very less disputes. That's a very important ability to have in this industry. And why I say this is because, again, we came in as outsiders. We can't claim to be so today. We've been here for 9 years. But what we see is that it is unlike a lot of other industries. The number of players in this industry is limited. Whether you look at ocean carriers, or whether you look at forwarders, or whether you look at carriers, the trucking companies, the number of players is limited. So which means that there has to be high trust among the players to ensure that the customer gets his value for the buck. That's very, very important here.
That is a fascinating thing you bring up. It's my personal opinion that one of the missteps that people that were pushing blockchain 6-7 years ago fundamentally misunderstood about shipping is they called this a trust-free environment. You're doing business with all these partners that you don't. Said that's not been my experience at all, right? Like you don't put your cargo, your precious cargo, in a box and hand it off to an entity for weeks without some trust in the system, right? So it's very interesting that you bring that up, and that's part of kind of understanding when to apply pressure, when to not, whether it's digitally or not, right? Very, very interesting point. Nemmara, I wanted to ask, in terms of Hapag's sort of approach, right? Like you went out in the market, you're working with ODeX, you're working, you mentioned with Pay Cargo. What's sort of Hapag's approach to sort of testing and piloting, payment technology or technology in general, if we can broaden it out that way, going and, leading up to this and then going forward, how would you sort of describe that?
Right. So, Eric, for us, we have a very rich history of 176 years in the shipping industry. And one of the reasons for our success has been our core value, which is we move. And by which I mean is we are always trying to be ahead of the curve and adopting technology and trying new things. We also believe in pace over perfection, and this has really stood us well in the history of Hapag-Lloyd and in our ability to succeed for several years in this business. So that is one thing. But we also, as I mentioned earlier, right, we are highly focused on being undisputed number one for quality. And to be undisputed number one for quality starts with listening to our customers and identifying those pain points. That's where it starts for us. And then leveraging the partners like we have today with PayPal and ODeX and others. We are always open to new ideas as long as they address our customer pain points. We are happy to try them out, and sometimes you succeed, some may not succeed, which is also fine. But the initiative is there always to try new things, and with the core belief of enhancing the customer experience, right? It all ties in to that core part of improving customer experience. I think that is what I firmly believe has helped us well all these years, and going forward also. We have several initiatives in the pipeline that you will hear about Hapag-Lloyd, and we will try. We are not afraid to try new things, and we will continue to do that and bring value to our customers. That is it's in our DNA now.
Thanks for that, Nora. You have a little bit. You have to catch up. Journal of Commerce is going to be 200 years old in 2027. So you're so, but yeah, that's a long track record. So, Bob, maybe one last question for you. I'm curious how PayPal thinks about, in terms of driving adoption. You're looking at this as a network, not necessarily one side or the other. If I'm understanding correctly, where do you think time would be spent most? Like, where's the most value for you in terms of driving adoption? Is it on the side that's issuing invoices? Is it on the side paying invoices? Where do you think needs the most attention?
Issuing invoices. Yeah. There's an opportunity to streamline that for sure. And the reach is much greater. I think, again, this is an international business. You need international currencies, and the PayPal wallet can be funded in so many different ways. I mentioned credit cards and debit cards and someone's bank account, but also crypto and stablecoin, right? Like that continues to grow in the segment as well.
There's actually a question that came in about that, so I can throw that your way if you're game. How prominent is the PayPal stablecoin involved in the B2B payment strategy and partnership you're speaking of now?
It's growing, right? So we introduced it just over a year ago. It was like the first week of August in 2023. It continues to grow. Again, it's like what Nemmara mentioned earlier. It's an option, right? I think as our globe continues to get smaller, we look at like stable coins and crypto as like the common currency for all of us, and being that partner that can use it as a funding mechanism to make payments is crucial, especially in this space, right? If I'm a retail store, it looks a lot different. But if I'm dealing with customers throughout the globe that deal in different currencies, but there's one common currency that they can all work with, I think it really opens up a lot of opportunities in this industry and electronic payments.
Cool. Interesting. There was a question that came in right on that, so I thought I would just start the Q&A. Yeah, very interesting. A couple other questions that came in before we wrap up. In international trade transactions, the laws of many countries require that some key documents, for example, the bill of lading, must be in paper and wet signed, therefore not in digital form. How do we sort of resolve that issue? We touched on it very briefly earlier, but we haven't really like talked about like where there's constraints that revolve around a digital document.
Yeah, Eric, are you asking me?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Nemmara.
Yeah, let me chime in here. Yes, I have definitely experienced that. There are some countries in the world where you actually need the paper BL for, and of course, we are, going to comply with the regulations that are there. This is something that we will always have exception to the rule, right? This is how, Eric, it's not a one size fits all in shipping industry. And we will always need the ability and the flexibility to cater to the government requirements and also some customer requirements. So this is the way we have to approach every new technology in shipping industry, at least, which, we don't have a lot of flexibility in avoiding some of these requirements. But we talked about the example, right? Like FMC's requirement, very stringent requirement about who will get the invoice. But we are complying with that requirement, but at the same time, through the delegation feature, we are still giving the customers the flexibility. So it is the matter of complying with the requirement. There are no two ways about it, but then also finding other flexible approaches that can help us.
Yeah, actually, Nemmara, I wanted to remind Nemmara that even there, Hapag-Lloyd is innovating. So in a few countries that we know, we work closely with Hapag-Lloyd to bring in digital counters. So for drop-off and collection of the physical BL, because what you really see is a lot of times these processes are sequential. But what Hapag has innovated is they said that the sequence, I don't need to be sequential. It is, you can pay me, you can pay the invoice. And today customers are used to picking up their stuff from Amazon from a digital locker. They're using something very similar to cut down the time of transaction and bring in more efficiency there. So interesting things happening in our part of the world where paper BLs are still prevalent.
Well, and concurrent, the digitization of payments is not the only stream of digitization that is happening, right? Hapag is one of, a 9 or 10 shipping lines that have committed to move to digital BLs by 2030. So at some point that sort of issue resolves itself if those commitments actually come to fruition. So it's all connected, right? So maybe one quick question, Liji, you can take this one. How easy or difficult has it been for the shipping industry to buy into digitization? Since you spoke about trust, this question is about trust. How did you build trust and confidence, especially with respect to payments, considering the volume of transactions? Maybe we can end with your answer.
So I'll take the last part of the question first. So in terms of handling the trust part on payments, this was a tough one. And this is what actually took us 4 years of work to build trust. But what we realized is one of the best ways is to work with brands that bring in a lot of trust. Like when we work with PayPal, we are talking about a AA rated organization that we work with. In other parts of the world, we work with banks that are AAA rated or plus, and we ensure that the security and the trust is taken care of from the payment side. What we also do in terms of digitization, and the question that comes up from ocean carriers is how stable or trustworthy is the infrastructure that ODeX ourselves have. And again, here we work with the large brands that support that. So we moved to AWS long back long before it was fashionable in our part of the world, because we realized that that's what brings in trust if we have to address small geographies like the globe, as Bob keeps saying, and that's what we do. So we work with brands that are trusted, that are household names, and we leverage their infrastructure to build our securities. So that's how we have grown.
Yep, fantastic. There's lots more to discuss on this, but unfortunately we have reached the end of the hour. Thank you, Liji. Thank you, Nemmara. Thank you, Bob. Really interesting discussion. I enjoyed it. Hope all of you did. Believe that a recording of the session will be available to those who registered very soon. Thank you to everyone who attended. We really appreciate your participation. Some great questions that came in at the end. And thank you all. Have a great rest of your week. And thank you again for joining the webcast today. Thanks again, Liji, Nemmara, and Bob. Great to talk today. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.